Aryan Michael.
And behind the camera, our manager is dead. Again.
He's not dead, guys. This is just a running joke between both of us. And he just had some family matter to attend. He'll come back soon.
Anyway, so today is episode 2 of DUMBSHIZ Interviews, where
Every goddamn person.
and every goddamn YouTuber, podcaster, and actually every damn person in the world,
Is our real estate.
you don't own them, interview them.
So, for this week's interview, we've got a very, very special guest today. And spoiler alert, I think this isn't the first time we've seen him, is it, Alan?
Nope, he was with us and he was our first ever guest when we were on Spotify. Check it out on Spotify.
So, without further ado, introducing Kristoff de Braganza.
Great theme music. I mean, I can see you guys got real production value since I was last here. I mean, there's different location, there's new lights, more than 0 cameras, major improvement, it's great. I'm proud of you guys. You've come a long way. Literally, we're not in the same place.
So let's kick off with the packet. How was your trip here?
Horrible. Why do you live here? Do you want to keep your existence a secret? This is the hardest place to find. I've never been here. I'm actually certain that I've never been on this road before in my life. And this is 10 minutes from where I live. How did you find this place? I was sworn it wasn't on the map a week ago. I'm not even sure how you put this on. It's actually bothering me. I'm sort of wondering if I try to the roads were shifting or some form of. But other than that, it's nice.
Part 4 reference.
Great area.
Yeah, this building has been here for around 5 years and we just got it.
Even I didn't know where it was. I had this guy help me find it.
Yeah, so
Now, in the PC and even in the console industry, they've been hit hard by the chip shortages and the scalping issue. So, has the 3D printing world also been faced with similar issues?
It's an interesting question. I would say no, because I think that, first of all, the manufacturing processes are quite different. So when we're looking at the kind of tolerances for making something like PC RAM or like Core i3, which irrespective of whether we think that's a fast or a slow process, the manufacturing process, 10 nanometers, it's that sort of thing. Versus 3D printing components are actually pretty simple. Like they're largely Arduinos, a lot of them, and Arduino derivatives. Like still, and there are independent companies who are kind of making their own boards, and so things are mostly 8-bit, and like occasionally you get your 32-bit on like a bit of the higher end. So the processing power required to run 3D printers and even CNCs, it's tiny compared to what you have in your smartphone. So maybe because of that, it just doesn't seem that that's been an issue. But that's just my perception. Maybe it is an effect to a certain degree. Maybe we just aren't buying new 3D printer boards that much these days. Like one of the issues with the global chip shortage and scalping, if you can look at them, two different issues are kind of two sides of the same coin, is that there is a huge increase in demand. And we tend to blame scalping when things are out of stock, but a lot of stuff that is bought does actually go to people and not scalpers. There is just a huge increase in demand across everyone who needs chips, and there's just a bunch of companies who make those chips. So it's incredibly difficult to kick those fabs up in production. And there's also, like, if you keep them out of production, when this COVID whole thing goes away, is that then you've got like excess capacity. You can use that for maintenance, I guess, but I don't know if that's a thing companies are interested in. All we know is Intel hit all their CPU goals, despite making not very good CPUs for a couple of years. So, I mean, the suits are happy, but as we know, they're going in a different direction now. Hopefully things will be better. It's kind of the best time and the worst time to buy PC components. They're really good, you can't get any. But happily with 3D printers, you can get them. There's still, I've not noticed any drop in supply. The biggest problem has been, for an Indian, not being able to get stuff from China. Not directly, at least.
Very, informative. We all used to think that this thing just takes one day.
And regarding your smaller projects, like let's say a client wants a flower. Now to go into the intricate details, is it like a bit more difficult than a simpler shape?
So this is one of the really cool, unique things about 3D printing. No, a complicated shape and a simple shape with the same amount of material will take roughly a similar amount of time. It's the only time a shape takes longer in complexity if the machine has to make weird moves that require it to slow down. There is an acceleration, it is bound by the laws of physics finally. But it's really that there's an overall rate at which material comes out, and the only thing that slows that down is acceleration and deceleration and special conditions. You want your outer surfaces to look nice, interior you don't care whether it looks nice or not. But what that means is you can have a really complicated shape and a really simple shape, and if they weigh the same amount, they'll take a roughly similar amount of time to print. And that changes from 3D printing technology to 3D printing technology. So different ones have different ways where complexity factors in. There's DLP, which is LCD light masking, and the way that works is that it does not matter how big a layer is, it only matters how many layers. And that's a little difficult to understand. What I mean is, it doesn't matter how wide or how long your part is, it only matters how tall it is. And similarly, it doesn't matter how many you print. So if you have a chess piece, like a king that's upright, if you want to make one in a DLP machine, and if you want to make 50, they take the same amount of time. So it does not, the time consumption, it varies in a very interesting way, and it's kind of unique to 3D printing. It's unique to that particular type of 3D printing. It's not true for resin printing that uses lasers, or powder printing that uses lasers. It's unique to DLP, and that's a very attractive thing about it, is if you make wide and long machines, you do the whole layer at once. So it just cures a layer at once. And if the cure time for a layer is 3 seconds, it doesn't matter if there's a tiny bit of that layer that's printed or the whole surface is printed. It'll always take 3 seconds. So it only matters how many layers. So that's kind of interesting how things like economies of scale don't really apply to 3D printing. It costs the same to make one part as it costs to make 100 parts, which is one of the more unattractive things about 3D printing. It's why it makes a lot more sense for big companies to still do injection molding, because the price per part is cheaper if you're making 10 million parts. But this time-related calculations, I imagine that people will find interesting ways of improving their manufacturing process, taking advantage of what just seems weird. Like, how can you make 50 parts in the same amount of time? And it with no negative effect on quality at all. But that's just one of the quirks of that specific type of 3D printing. And it's interesting, it's fun. We find ways of using the tech and taking advantage of how it's just thoroughly unique. There are many shapes that you can only 3D print. Like, there's the only manufacturing process that exists to make that particular shape is 3D printing. You can't CNC it, you can't mill it, you certainly can't do it manually. So it's always changing. And the list of 3D printing techs in my head, maybe by the time this video goes out, there'll be a new one that I've heard of. That's kind of the rate at which the information becomes obsolete, and that's really exciting.
So, Kristoff, regarding your, do you really own a Hilton, or like are you a stakeholder or something? Everybody wants to know, especially us, because you've been marketing the fact that you're the owner of Hilton.
If this question reaches the air, I'll never speak to you again. What is this? Get out of here. Can't have anyone hear this.
Okay, I guess he is.
Redacted.
Redacted.
I hate you guys. Okay.
That's one of the things I want to hit. My freaking company. My dad and uncle set up. I don't own shit. I own these jeans. That's about it. I don't own the car I came here with. I barely own the fuel I put in it.
Okay.
Don't pick me up. It's not fun.
Okay. So recently you like moved. You told me before.
I mean, like, it's true, but it's like there's nothing. It's just like there's nothing. I just.
Okay, I guess his parents don't want to know that he moved. Okay, so let's continue.
Alright. Now let's get back to our main topic. So you're working. We're not going to talk about what you're working, but you're working nonetheless. And
Yeah, I have a day job.
yes, you have a day job.
He does something. We don't know what it is. It could be drugs also, but no one knows.
Judging by the lighting that has been put on me, it looks like I'm a drug dealer being
It's
introduced
not a mugshot, don't worry.
in some hole in like South America by Vice Media, but nonetheless,
Anyway, let's get
I'm
back.
in Napsa, which is similar.
You're working a day job and you're doing this as a hobby. Now, do
Yeah.
you get enough time to do it, or are you too busy in your job?
I mean, simple answer is I'm hella busy, but you do struggle. I mean, it's almost like a litmus test on whether you actually care about something or whether you're not that into it. Because I mean, we've all tried at least a dozen hobbies by now. We've all must have tried an instrument at some point, a sport, and this and that. You pick up stuff, you drop it. This is sort of something that I've stuck with. And I'm very aware of that. I'm very aware that I cannot leave it alone. So I will just always be thinking of something to do with this tech. And I can never see myself actually leaving it aside. Like, I've got a guitar that's gathering dust. I don't do that with my machines. That being said, I have 3 machines gathering dust, but I have one that's not, and that's what makes the difference. that's the line across. Yeah, I mean, you make time, don't you? I mean, everyone's busy. That's just how the world is now. We're not about to have a 4-day work week, so you kind of have to struggle to have a good schedule and make time for things that you care about. But in a way, it does really inform you about what you actually care about and whether something is a hobby you'll have forever, or if you'll drop it. Because, a lot of people do. It's not like the tech is so mesmerizing. Anyone who ever buys a 3D printer uses it all the time. Pretty common to buy one, use it a bit, get bored, and then it just gathers dust.
So now, what have you thought about for your future in this career, in this path?
Well, one thing that I know for sure is that people do tend to ask me about 3D printing stuff, but I don't want that to be my whole deal. I do want to get into other forms of machining, and I mean, I don't know if you can call 3D printing machining. I think in kind of a sense it almost is. It's literally not, because of the sort of definition of what machining is. But in the sense that someone who operates one maybe could be considered a sort of machinist in a way. I do want to get into that because I have a lot of appreciation for what we might look as old school methods of getting this done. Old school versus, let's say, multi-axis CNC, which is your high-tech, largely automated cam-based machinery. So it's like 3D printing in that in 3D printing you design something and a software figures out what the machine has to do and then it tells the machine to do it. CNC is kind of like that. You put material on a bed, you design something, and then a software figures out how the machine is going to turn that block of wood into the carving that you have designed. So in that sense, the skill set, 3D printing and CNC, there's a lot of overlap there. Like it transfers a lot, and I want to get into that. And then I want to keep going. Like, obviously, I can't move a bunch of heavy machinery through the front door of the house because that would be sort of insane. CNCs are a little bit messy. You know, I don't know if I can like clean up a kilo of wood chips out of my bedroom every day. I feel like it would make sleeping there a little bit dusty. So I'll get there eventually, but I have so much fun learning about how things are made that I'm 100% sure that I will not just stick to one type of 3D printing, and I'm not going to stick to just 3D printing. I'll definitely try out as much as I can, and I'll probably go too far as well, but that's part of it, isn't it?
Plenty of really good 3D CNC machines as well. I think Haas makes a really good bunch of CNC machines. In fact, if you actually get pretty good at it, I'm pretty sure you might end up replacing the engineers in the Haas F1 team as well. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, how dare you? Second of all, I mean, okay, let's not say me, but let's just say in general, 3D printed parts are already in F1. There's already a ton of things that are 3D printed for Formula 1 cars. Just because that is one of those sports that really does chase after the bleeding edge of what's possible. Just looking for that unfair advantage over your rival team. So they've been kind of early adopters. I mean, remember, this is just teams and teams of engineers largely, who are very aware that this stuff exists and have the means, especially the larger teams, with what used to be $450 million budgets. We're talking Mercedes and Ferrari, and Red Bull comes in at 200. Now everything is kind of capped, and the next few years the cap is going to get a little bit stricter, but still, it's still plenty of budget to try, and they have an incentive to try. It's a competition sport. They don't get anything done by playing it safe, especially at that part. So to reply to your question, the engineers at Haas are 3D printing. So I mean, that's just like what they're doing. There's probably been a bit of a shift. There are some parts that used to be CNC that will be 3D printed now, which might be annoying to a team like Haas, which has the Haas name on it. But I mean, it's 2021. I don't know how much longer that Haas name is going to be on the side of the car. I suspect next year we may not see it called that. But, you know.
This guy is just zoning out right now.
Okay, hey, one second. Can we like pause for a second?
Yeah, sure.
It is still called Haas, right?
Ural Kali Haas.
Yeah. Okay, whatever. We can just cut this bit out. Because it is Sunday, and it's Zandvoort today. In fact, it's Zandvoort in an hour or so, and who knows? I mean, this is going to go out more than a week from now.
Yeah.
So Monza will happen.
Monza will happen.
Okay, so everyone watching at home, Monza, yay! Or maybe, but
If it's like Spa Part 2, then definitely no.
Oh, boo! You stink! Spa.
Rain, due to rain.
Basically nothing. What happened is I and a friend of mine stared at a TV screen for 4 hours to watch nothing.
Safety car racing.
So they completed a minimum number of laps behind the safety car. Behind the safety car means that there was no overtaking, they were driving very slowly because it was raining really heavily. And so what happened is all the cars went out for like basically a parade lap practically because there was no chance of anyone changing positions. And they just did that a bit, and whatever positions they started the race in, that's the positions they finished the race in. So basically qualifying decided the win. The only sort of, I mean, it's half points though. So the winner got half as many points as they would have if it was a proper race. And I think that improves it a little bit because I don't think anyone thinks of this as a legitimate race. It's not. Then there's a chance that could happen again. And that really annoys me because I'll still watch it. If it starts raining and it red flags the session, after they start immediately, or it never even starts the first lap, I'll still be watching the race in case they do. It's just abuse of Formula One fans, because we're sort of idiots that way. We do take this abuse, but yeah, so does everyone who watches any sport, I guess.
For the first time, I can say wrestling fans, lucked out instead of Formula One fans, because I don't think, if you remember, when we stayed up to watch WrestleMania, there was a rain delay for like half an hour.
I was asleep during that time. I didn't get proper sleep the whole time. But yeah, the matches were really interesting. Anyway, but now that we have spoken about the issues at Spa, I think what happened in qualifying also is another major problem, right? You remember Lando Norris was going really fast. The rain was just as heavy as it was on Sunday, maybe even more. And then he had a huge off and he crashed into Rouge. Don't you think that there's a huge problem with the track and that it probably there's something that needs resurfacing? Even Formula W series, for instance. What the fuck's a Rouge? It's a turn.
I mean, W series is maybe an even better example than the Norris thing. I mean, I think some people were saying that there might have been an issue, there was maybe some oil on the track, and that's why you...
Pause, 10 minutes left.
And that was, so that people were saying that there may have been an issue, and there might have been oil on the track or something like that. I know Abby Eaton was racing in that race, and it's a bit sad to see her get into an accident involving so many vehicles. It was pretty bad. Lando, luckily, was by himself, so he didn't crash into another vehicle. It was really serious safety hazard. Spa is Spa, in kind of in the way that Monaco is Monaco. Spa is Spa. So Eau Rouge to Ravion, those two corners are really famously dangerous, and we lost someone to Eau Rouge and Ravion. Hubert.
R.I.P. Hubert.
R.I.P. Hubert, indeed, and we haven't forgotten that. But it is a conversation that needs to be had about safety, because the FIA tries very hard to make this as safe as possible, and the sport has gotten amazingly safe. You look at since 1994, I think, was when Senna died, and that was at Imola. And since then, the only person who's died from injuries sustained in Formula One was Jules Bianchi, who died from injuries sustained. So he died a year after his accident, and we have not squandered that knowledge, because we've
introduced the halo in that time.
So the halo is amazing. It's proven itself a number of times. Grosjean's crash the previous year was horrendous. When he goes through,
he went through the barrier.
He went straight through a barrier like a bullet. And if the halo wasn't there, the thing deflecting the barrier would be him. His helmet would be the thing hitting the barrier. And the halo is. I wrote an article about it in a college magazine a while ago, which was it's a solid chunk of titanium. It's really strong. I think Mercedes claimed that you could drop a double-decker bus on it and it would barely deflect. And because it's designed to handle incredibly high dynamic loading, and it's done just that. I bet there's a bunch of drivers who've avoided dangers. But getting back to the topic, which is the track. Spa is inherently difficult to make a little bit safer, just because of the geometry, the sort of landscape. Because it's blind. We know that a bit of it is blind, that the drivers can't see the track as they're going past Eau Rouge over Ravion. And we also know that there's not a huge amount of runoff area, and that's another thing that contributed to why Hubert had that horrendous incident. But in my opinion, Monaco is worse. But Monaco is kind of the poster child of F1. No one wants to suggest that maybe Monaco is too dangerous for modern F1. But it is a street track on modern F1. Cars going 300 kilometers an hour. I mean, I think it's a conversation that needs to be had at some point. No one wants to have it because it's Monaco.
But Monaco is a much slower track, right? There's much less room for overtaking than there is at Spa.
Yeah, but is that, a good thing? Nothing has happened so far, but we know how close, people go. It's true, the speed at which you will have an accident at Monaco is a lot slower than the speed at which you have an accident in Spa. But in Spa, you at least get a bit of runoff. Monaco, it's straight into the guardrails.
Yeah.
It is frightening to watch. And F1, doesn't do that many street tracks. And we see Formula E, and it's like rugby. Sometimes the first corner, like 15 car pileups. Every race is a street track. I'm like, people say that Formula E is not a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise in Formula E. You can hear crunching metal all the time and carbon fiber. It's all over the place. But I trust that people will look at that and make the right decision eventually. It may mean that emotionally we'll be scarred by things like removing Monaco or Spa from the calendar, which would break my heart. But maybe it's the right thing to do.
Removing them would make more sense than resurfacing because it would ruin the track completely as well. We don't want another Sochi.
What?
Well, there are some tracks that we really like and some tracks we don't. My favorite is Spa. I love it more than Monaco. And largely because of Eau Rouge to Radio. But it has to be said, how many Who Bears are going to happen? Because, it is just dangerous, that track. We have to have that conversation.
So, moving on to the final question. This is sponsored by our dead manager minutes before he died. So yeah, do you play any video games?
I mean, in case it wasn't clear by now that I was the biggest dork in the 2-mile radius, yes, I do play video games as well.
Like, do you
as
play
the final nail in that coffin.
So like, do you play F1 titles?
I do play F1 because I'm that one-dimensional of a character. Then what do I like?
You just
F1.
like us.
I might as well buy the games of the things that I watch on the TV at the time on the day.
Okay, so again, another question from the guy that just died. Do you like arcade or simulation or like the mix?
I want to get into simulation. I've dabbled in simulation, but simulation is a bit all or nothing. I'm a little bit too busy for all or nothing. Sometimes you just want to start something up and just get straight into it. And so, as a result of that, I'm a bit more into arcade, or at least things where you can kind of jump straight in, like Horizon 4, rather than F1 2017. Because like when I'm in a menu, I'm thinking, how many laps should I do? Should I do 30? Should I do 50? Should I do like 2 days of practice? This is not that fun. This is too real. It's too much like real life. It's like it's only a matter of time. They're like, okay, this repair cost takes an hour. Go away, do something else for an hour while we repair this car in real time. I mean, that's not a thing, but like that's kind of what it reminds me of obviously it's a game, so you can choose to have almost none of that. You can get straight into it. It's not, But I do want to be that person who has. I've built like a kind of racing sim cockpit, and it's the most uncomfortable thing I've ever sat in. So I need to fix that first, and then like put it on wheel and monitors and all that, and get into that whole thing. But the more I look at it, I'm like, when will I ever have the time? I'm kind of terrified that I've just wasted 40, 50 hours maybe of putting that thing together, and then I just won't use it. But hey, it looks nice.
Okay. So yeah. And for that, folks, thank you so much, Krista, for joining us. I know you had to sacrifice a lot of time to be here. Thanks for doing this again.
It really was a pleasure.
Yeah. Any final remarks?
No, I mean, the pleasure was all mine. It wasn't a lot, but it was all mine. And it was fun. It's a Sunday, putting the set together, recording a video, and I hope I never see you guys again.
On that note, see you guys. Peace.
Peace.